And this is another aspect of the masjid now. There are committees in the masjid. There's a dawah committee. Sometimes there's a social welfare committee, finance committee. There are various committees that people can be a part of. So it's not you just come, but you also have a responsibility, and you're asked to take on responsibility for the functioning of the community. So, for instance, in that regard, there's a dawah committee, and one of the functions of the dawah of the community, or the committee to invite people, a lot of them, what they do now is they go to the local universities or high schools, and, they make presentations, and even to some churches, and then they invite people, say, now, come. We want you to come, and we'll have, special presentations. And they come, and we provide places for them, and there's, of course, now there things are high-tech, so we put up the laptop and, we put up, nice, PowerPoint presentations about Islam, and have a discussion, which is very good. Yeah. It's very good.
I remember in Bahrain, there's a big masjid there, Masjid al-Fatih. It's enormous. We made it part of we told the tourist board, to make it part of their itinerary. And they did. And eventually they dropped it because the people didn't want to leave. They had dozens of questions. And,
yes.
We used to have a bias for the ladies. And
yes.
Things like this.
Yeah.
And, they loved it,
Well, this is very good. And this is something, of course, that's done, I'm sure, as I know it happens here in Sharjah and Dubai, where there are certain masajid that are part of the mosque tour. I think this is what I understand.
But do they go in?
I think they do. I'm not sure. I've never been on one of these tours before, so I don't know if people are actually allowed to go in or not.
Yeah.
I hope so, quite frankly. I hope that would happen so that people can see. I do know, I was reading on the internet actually today, and there was some organization who I think provides information to non-Muslims about what they should expect and what kinds of etiquette that they should, how they should conduct themselves when they visit a mosque. And it was very nice, actually, because it told them, that, listen, be respectful, and, if you're a lady, wear something over your head. If your dress or whatever should be down at least to your ankles, preferably, this kind of a thing, which is very good. And I think this is good that people are aware, or at least are being made aware, of a proper conduct that should, that should be in the masjid. And of course, that's another aspect, for us as Muslims, we have to learn about our conduct. What should be our conduct, in the masjid? What kinds of things can we do? What kind of things, shouldn't we do, in the masjid? For instance, we shouldn't do buying and selling.
Oh, yeah, buying and selling is forbidden, isn't it?
Buying and selling, this is not allowed to, in the masjid.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a place of business. Now the business is outside, but certainly, we can give charity. We can certainly give charity and and help the needy in that regard. But buying and selling, of course, would be one of the things. And whatever is generally, and whatever, of course, is haram is haram. Whatever is haram outside of the masjid, of course, is haram inside the masjid. But something specifically, for instance, I know one of the things I've heard you mention this sometimes, doing the Friday khutbahs, in terms of what we wear. Meaning particularly sometimes, because now it's very popular particularly with the young people, to wear T-shirts with the name or the picture of the latest, rock and roll star or that kind of a thing. But Muslims should not really wear, or people should not wear, Muslims and people in general, when they're in the masjid, should not wear things with images on them, clothing with images, or clothing that would expose their aura, or what we mean, the parts of their body, the private parts, or the parts of the body that should not be exposed to the public. We have to be very, very careful of that we uphold, the proper standards of how the masjid should be. And now, of course, we have carpets and things like this, and so, again, not to, wear dirty shoes inside the masjid. And most people say don't wear shoes at all. It's not prohibited to do that, by the way.
Oh, you try it.
But we have come. Here's one of the things that's happened now. We have come to make that wajib almost, or compulsory, that we take off our shoes when we go in the masjid. Now, of course, we should follow the customs of the society we're in, and yes, it would be better because we could be bringing something in on our shoes that would,
especially in the West.
Yeah, particularly if you're in places where there are dogs and other kinds of animals. So this is better, of course. But the point is, one can pray with his shoes on.
Surely the first Muslims they
prayed with their shoes on, for sure.
They did.
Yeah.
Some young brothers in Medina years ago, they tried to revive this.
Yes.
And they were picked up bodily and tossed out by
I'm sure they were.
Turks and
Yeah,
Pakistanis.
I'm sure they were. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is happening just sometimes just to make the point, that we can do that. But this can be done without the actual demonstration.
Yeah.
The education is fine.
What about young children in the mosque?
Young children in the mosque is fine, as long as we educate the young children of how they should behave themselves. This is important because the young children the parents should bring the young children to the mosque and tell them and educate them, for instance, during the time of the prayer, now we're to be quiet. We're not to talk and we're not to run around, and to hold them beside them.
It's very hard for
It's
a
very difficult to do.
3-year-old to sit still.
It is
for a
very
whole
difficult to do, But you can hold them. I mean, if you have to have them there, if you're in a situation where, you can't sit in the car with them, then, if you're driving around, then you should hold them and hold them with you, but not to just allow them to run around. But children have to learn, young children have to learn how to behave and how to, conduct themselves. And if you have little babies, of course. And here's another thing that's important, I think that's good for us Muslims to know. If you're in the masjid and you have your baby with you, and maybe the baby's acting fine for a while, but after a while the baby wakes up or whatever and starts crying and yelling, leave. It is okay to pick the baby up or to hold the baby first. If the baby doesn't stop, then to actually walk away. You can leave the line. You can leave the line and go out and resume your prayer later, once the baby has calmed down.
Because that's often an argument against having women in the mosque.
Yes.
And we know the English khutbahs here.
Yes.
You put a place for women and they bring little, almost like newborns,
Yeah.
tiny babies.
Yeah. Well, so here's what's happening is this. Well, two things with this. Number one, of course, as we know, that women cannot be stopped from coming to the masjid. And this goes back to the time of Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ, did not forbade the women from coming to the masjid. Although it is clear, he made it clear that it is better for the women to pray at home. It is better.
Yeah.
But if they want to come, you cannot stop them, if the women want to come. Now, when women come to the masjid, of course, they should come properly. One, they should come with proper dress, hijab, of course, no perfume, and if they are bringing their children, again, be aware that if the baby starts crying and disturbing the others from the prayer, now if you're sitting having conversation, that's another thing. But if if you're doing the time of the prayer, then hold the baby, or if the baby does not stop, leave the masjid or leave the line so that you can properly, settle the baby down and make your prayers later. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that. Yeah.
In other words, everyone's welcome, but there's codes of behavior.
Everyone is welcome, but there are codes of behavior. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, if you're uncontrollably having sneezing or something or coughing, because we're now talking about the time for the prayers, for the time of the salah specifically. Other times, of course, obviously it's more relaxed. But during the times of the prayer, there's the prayer is for the worship of Allah, is for concentration. So anything that takes away from concentration should be avoided, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So the crying, the baby's crying, or the uncontrollable coughing or sneezing or whatever, one should remove himself or herself, so that the others, can, take advantage of the prayer, of the purpose of the prayer.
Mm. Do you ever have anyone die in the mosque in America?
I have heard, no, not that I witnessed, but actually, though, in my hometown, I think, if I recall, some years ago, brother in Fajr, they said he passed, in Fajr.
Yeah, no, in Birmingham, an old Bosnian brother, he died in the prayer.
Yes. Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. We can only say alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Exactly. So we hope that the Muslims can, for those of us that don't, the communities, that we revive the purpose of the masjid, have more activities. In the few places, in this city, in Sharjah, where occasionally there are, talks after Maghrib or Asr. I'm really happy, to see, when that happens. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, every now and then. But I think we should at least understand that this is how the masjid, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, this is how it was used. It was the community center. It was the center of the community. It was the center of the community. It was the life of the community. And this is where decisions were made. You know, this is where friendships were tied. This is where, life began in many cases in terms of, the weddings and, the walimas and et cetera. And people were taken care of in terms of their physical health. I mean, during the time of battles, people were taken there to be treated for their wounds and et cetera. So it was, in fact, the center.
Yeah.
It wasn't the center of the Muslim's life. Yeah.
Do you remember that hadith about the Christians of Najd?
I don't remember that specifically, but I mean, vaguely remember that they were allowed, and I think there was a delegation that came to the Prophet ﷺ at that time. Yeah.
They were allowed to pray in the masjid
Yes.
and sleep in the masjid.
Yes. Yeah, and many delegations, of course, that would come to see the Prophet ﷺ, and they were allowed to sleep in the masjid. They would stay there, and it was some kind of we talked about earlier, hostel of sorts, for a short overnight stays to be able to stay and to sleep there. Mm-hmm. And it was really, if we look at it and we use, the masjid in that way, then we can see it becomes very important for building and strengthening community life. Yeah, very much so.
The Prophet ﷺ also said,